Okay, called back to order the meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisor Cerna?
Here.
Peters?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
And you have a quorum.
We are going to take an item out of order, and we'll go right to 58 because our recipient for 57 is not here.
Okay. Item 58 is the resolution of necessity authorizing eminent domain action to acquire real property for Hazel Avenue widening project, Madison Avenue to Sunset Avenue, Phase 3, Javad Ahsan and Mai N. Ahsan as trustees of the Ahsan Family Revocable Living Trust, dated 9/29/18, located at 5119 Hazel Avenue.
Good afternoon, Chair Kennedy and members of the board. I'm Peter Hannon, Program Manager of Acquisitions, the Real Estate Division, and I'm here today to introduce this item which recommends board approval for one resolution of necessity authorizing an eminent domain action to acquire real property interests for the Department of Transportation's Hazel Avenue Widening Project Phase 3, which runs from Sunset Avenue to Madison Avenue. The project's Phase 3 involves the widening of Hazel Avenue from 4 to 6 lanes and the construction of new bicycle and pedestrian facilities with landscaping strips along Hazel Avenue from Sunset Avenue to Madison. The purpose of this project is to reduce congestion, establish a safer environment for all modes of transportation, and create an attractive, functional, and publicly inviting corridor. Of the 33 acquisitions required for the third phase of the project, one property is the subject of this board item. The subject property is located at 5119 Hazel Avenue in Fair Oaks, between Sunset Avenue to the south and Madison Avenue to the north. The property features a residential improvement. The real property interest the county seeks to acquire consists of a temporary construction easement needed for the project across a portion of the affected property. The county obtained an appraisal for the affected property from an independent appraiser and presented an offer to the respective property owners for the purchase of the easements I just mentioned. The county's negotiations with the owner have reached an impasse. The county is thus unable to secure the necessary easement interest in the subject property under the current circumstances. Today's resolution of necessity is an anticipated eminent domain action will provide for possession of the required real property interest and construction of the project while the county proceeds to acquire the easements through eminent domain if necessary. Information to support the required statutory resolution of necessity finding is contained within the staff report included with the agenda packet along with the owner's contact histories. Notice of intention to seek approval of the resolution of necessity was mailed to the respective property owner by registered mail and standard U.S. mail at least 15 days before this hearing. If you have any questions regarding the project or any of the property in question, I or other project team members currently present are available to address those for you. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? I have no speaker slips. Is there anyone in public that would like to address this item? Okay, is there a motion?
Thank you very much. I'll move the item.
Okay, and chair will second. Let's vote.
Unanimous vote.
We'll wait until 2:15.
To reset, hit the button, the gavel, tell them we're in recess.
Okay, we'll come back to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisors Frost?
Here.
Natoli?
Here.
Peters?
Here.
Cerna?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Item 59, please.
Item 59 is the zoning code amendments relating to short-term rentals. Request to amend the Sacramento County Zoning Code User Guide and Zoning Code Chapters 3, 6, and 7 relating to short-term rentals. And the environmental determination is exempt.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Leanne Moffett, your planning director. I have a verbal presentation and no PowerPoint. To start off, the Sacramento County in our zoning code adopted a vacation rental permit provision back with the overall zoning code update in 2015. This is an annual permit that folks get in order to do like Airbnb, VRBO, or other rentals like that. We have issued approximately 35 permits in the last 4 years, and staff have identified some refinements to the program that we are recommending to you today in the form of amendments to the ordinance, to the zoning code. Our intent is to allow for such short-term rentals while encouraging the considerate operation and mitigation of negative impacts to surrounding neighbors. So first off, we're changing the name of the program from vacation rental permits to short-term permits, since not everyone who avails themselves of a short-term rental is necessarily on vacation. We have an improved definition, including that the rental may occur on a year-round basis, but to no more than 29 days per rental party. We have a number of expanded use standards, including evidence that either the owner or the long-term renter lives on site a minimum of 6 months per year, that there's a maximum occupancy based on no more than 2 people per bedroom, that the house rules, permit, and phone number of the rental host be posted on site. And we do now allow for some small events accessory to the short-term rental to occur on site. We also have a number of administrative changes proposed, clarifying that the process for revocation, modification, or appeal is as the same as other permits, and that we will provide notice to the neighbors after the permit is issued, including with contact information to both the rental host and planning and environmental review staff. The review process, including offering a presentation to the Community Planning Advisory Councils. We had 3 CPACs request presentations and 1 request additional information in writing. The Planning Commission heard this on 2 occasions, and the provision that they worked on was this allowance for the small accessory events on site. And so with that, staff is recommending approval of the ordinance, including recognizing the exempt status and approval of the zoning code amendments. Are there any questions?
Supervisor Frost.
I'm wondering why 29 days?
I think that's the limit where we decide it goes into a long-term rental, where you're a monthly renter, and versus if it's a short-term stay, then you're there for 29 days or less. Otherwise, you're just renting a house as a normal renter.
And it would just be, you can rent a house for a
rent.
month. It just goes on your tax return, on your schedule.
Right, you're just a normal
Real estate
house
schedule.
renter,
Okay.
right? Which we don't preclude or have any additional provisions for.
Supervisor Peters.
Thank you. The language about that the Planning Commission discussed for some time having to do with the size of events. So staff submitted something larger than barbecues and something like that. So I assume you were saying no gatherings at all?
Our initial proposal was very limited, essentially to no events. And they felt if someone was staying at a house for, 2 weeks or 3 weeks and they wanted to have a handful of people over to celebrate a birthday, that was perfectly reasonable and accessory to
So there's
someone
not a
being
set
there.
number of people that's a max?
No, I don't think we have a specific defined number. We
So
just
how
say
do
they
you
can have-
enforce that then? Maybe I ask county council.
Right.
Let me look at the language.
The exact language is personal gatherings that include individuals not staying overnight at the rental are allowed, provided the gathering is accessory to use of the rental as short-term lodgings. Gatherings shall not result in noise exceeding normal residential levels. Personal gatherings can include barbecues, family reunions, baby showers, and other similar private events. So that's the language that the Planning Commission
So
worked up.
it sounds like it's going to be a noise,
Governed by noise.
Governed by
Or
noise.
I would say,
Parking.
if somebody decided to host a 100-person wedding, that would probably not fall within a similar event to a baby shower or a barbecue. Someone could push that definition too hard.
so when someone comes in to get their license for an Airbnb, this will be part of the notification of the rules and requirements?
It is, and it's in the zoning code, so it's enforceable.
And not everybody
as well.
looks at the zoning code. They might
Yes.
just come in.
Yes.
So it's definitely they will get a copy of the rules and regulations?
Yes.
And so if someone has a complaint at the moment, there'll be a phone number posted on the front of the house or something?
Yes,
Does it
so
say-
there's we're requiring a posting of both the host's phone number as well as planning's phone number, but the host being the primary.
So you're wearing a
contact.
pager 24/7 now?
No, we don't. We would not.
So it's the host, not the owner? The host of the party or the host of the visitor?
The host can either be the property owner, or if someone is a long-term rental, like they have a lease, and their lease allows them to have an Airbnb room or a VRBO or Airbnb,
Okay.
then they would be the host.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Just,
Mr. Natoli.
yeah, just to follow on Susan's line of questioning, so then who would be the enforcing entity? Because I trust if it's a weekend event or if the sheriff gets called out, you're not going to be sending code enforcement officers typically after, regular business hours. If there's no awareness of what those conditions are, in fact, I know where we've had temporary use permits, even when those conditions have been applied, and noise has become a factor, and becomes very difficult to enforce that. So if you were to get a complaint, and we weren't able to, you're not going to go in and probably shut the baby shower down or the wedding party. That probably doesn't happen, even with the sheriff's department. But then is there some follow-on action that you would then look to, is there a revocation process for this? And is it something that's done through your authority, Leanne, as planning director, so it doesn't require a big drawn-out hearing?
Yeah, there is a revocation process, which can, as you well know, be a fairly lengthy process. The other key factor here is that these are annual permits. So in the instances where we've had bad behavior, our other option, if the revocation process is going to be lengthy and take too long, is we don't issue a permit. We gather
Just tell the neighbors,
evidence.
put up with it for a year, and then we'll get to it when
We either start revocation, which can take almost as, depending on where it is in that year, it may be easier just to not issue it the following year and to work with them on compliance.
And just, I guess, to the reverse, so in the event that you're having these are folks who are coming in for permits, and you've got close to 40 of them now, then maybe they're the good actors, but so what about the bad actors? And then, or beyond, obviously, the immediacy of a call to the sheriff, if there's an issue, then is code enforcement the ones that will go out and say, now we have this ordinance that applies to this, we understand, you're hosting events under things that would fall under short-term rentals.
Yes, so
that's
code
the
enforcement is our enforcement arm typically, so we would work with them to try to bring people into compliance or to stop them from doing an unpermitted rental where there's a problem. And we have had to do that, not frequently, but I think we've had a house or two that have been a problem, and we have successfully stopped people from running, as we call them, party houses.
Okay.
So.
All right,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this to turn on. So it looks like most of them are in the denied or expired category. There's about 14 of them that are green on this map,
Yes.
right?
So we have a number of addresses where people initially came in for a permit and then they did not return. I don't know if they weren't successful at renting it enough to make it worthwhile or what, but yeah.
Where's
Those
the
that are denied or revoked, are they mostly noise-related, loud parties, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Do you have any guesstimate of how many Airbnbs there are that haven't gotten a license?
There is a separate effort going on to, through finance and through county council, to try to ensure that people are primarily paying their required TOT tax and getting their licenses. And so that effort is separate from this zoning code item, which is really about when they come in for a permit, how we process that permit. But there are other efforts going on in the county to make sure that everybody who's out there renting homes using Airbnb, VRBO, or whatever other platforms there are for these short-term rentals are getting those permits. So you will probably see something back before the board here in a few months in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Move the item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Four minutes.
4-minute gap.
Okay, if the clerk would please call item 60.
Item 60 is the appeal of the decision of hearing officer's denial of renewal of a general business license and revocation of a business license. The appellant is Michael Liu, Golden Dragon 888, doing business as Casa Linda Motel.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm just introducing the item and then the appellant can go first. This is an appeal of a hearing officer's decision to uphold the county's revocation and denial of renewal of a business license for Casa Linda Motel.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
It might be for Chris or Diana, give us a little instructions. These are a quasi-judicial hearing. If I recall, we do them very infrequently, but there is a certain order to this. And so in fairness to...
Yeah, I usually find that it's easier to have the county side at least introduce it and then allow the appellant to respond and then maybe give them the final shot as well, just to lay the groundwork of what's happened here and what's...
So who from staff is here prepared?
Or
Is that-
Me.
Diana can do
Yes.
it. Yeah.
And
So
before you-
if you can just give a summary of where we are and why we're here, and then we can turn it over to the appellant.
Okay, before you start, I just wanted, but just relative to the structure of the hearing too,
yes.
I think that would be important to know, as you just described, at least in part, Krista, but, we typically have
Options of how to conduct.
Yeah, there's options that, relative to the testimony entered the record and what's, oral arguments versus the written material that comes to us to do a de novo hearing.
Right. So the county code lays out 3 different options for the way that the board can conduct the hearing. The first one, and which is the one that we recommend, is that the board denies the introduction of any new evidence and decides the matter after oral argument, which you'll be hearing today. Another option is for the board to admit supplementary evidence with respect to challenges or particular findings. Or the third option is for the board to reject the findings of the hearing officer and conclusions of the hearing officer and conduct a de novo hearing. My understanding is that the appellant has not presented new evidence, and there's no reason to select one of the other 2 options. So my recommendation is that the board go with option 1, which is go with oral argument only today.
Okay, and with the oral argument, just to be clear, then they've submitted some information in writing, so that goes as a part of their oral argument today. Then is that considered to be a part of that?
Yes.
Actually, I'm sorry. I just got a copy of the information submitted to the board, and it's not just argument, there is new evidence.
Oh, and I don't think I've even seen that. So, here. Okay.
Okay, well, maybe you can take a look at that if we're going to. But I wanted to ask one other question that relates to the time frame. Typically, we have a 2 or 3 minute time frame.
No, from the applicant.
For a presentation. I'm sorry, but because it, again, if I'm not mistaken, it is quasi-judicial when you revoke a license, and so should we prescribe some additional time for them to make a presentation, should they need it? And I've kind of asked this through the chair, but this is
For
not.
who to make it?
For the appellants. You don't just give them 2 minutes to make
Oh,
their.
no, I
Yeah,
would allow.
Yeah.
No, no,
I
not
want
2 minutes.
I just want to be clear because it is.
No,
a
I
little-
would allow them a reasonable time to present their case,
All
not
right.
2 minutes.
Okay,
I'm
all
still
right.
trying to figure out what it is that was presented by the appellant. I don't,
Right. This was just handed out.
but this is from Code Services.
No, but they got pictures in there, and they have a letter that's going to be their verbal written testimony.
Okay, 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 all right, okay, all right, got it, thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So the board memo explains the situation. Basically, this business has been licensed by the current owner since 2016. And in 2018, because of a number of complaints from neighbors about criminal and nuisance activity at this location, the business license had conditions imposed on it. And those conditions are attached to exhibit, I think it's exhibit 3, which is the license, and it lists all the conditions. And the property was inspected. The owner didn't object to the imposition of conditions. And the property was inspected in July of 2018, and numerous violations were found. As a result of that, the county issued a revocation of the business license sometime later, and the appellant appealed and said, you haven't even looked at the property recently. So in October, the county went out and inspected the property again and found additional violations of the conditions, and and I'll get into the substance of those in a minute. And so we did an amended revocation of the business license as a result of the additional violations that we found. And some of the ones that previously existed had been cleared, but new ones were found. And so in November, we issued an amended revocation of the business license, and the appellant again appealed, and we were attempting to set the matter for hearing, but it didn't get set quickly. And as of January 2019, the business license came up for its renewal, and so we couldn't ignore that. So we issued a denial of the renewal on the same grounds, basically because of all of these violations and open code and building cases. And the appellant appealed, and I can't remember why, but we did an amended denial of renewal too. I'm not exactly sure why. I can't remember. But anyway, and we told the appellant that the matter was currently set for hearing on March 12th, 2019. And we told the appellant if he wanted both, if he already had appealed both, if he wanted to have those two issues heard at the same time and not have to pay two appeal fees, we would let him do that. And he did request that. So on March 12th, there was a hearing about all of the violations and grounds for revocation of the license and of denial of renewal. And the grounds were included violations of conditions on the license. If you look at page 5 of the board memo, So it talks about needing a complete register for the occupants, and that was a problem because it was awfully difficult to tell who was staying there, and I think there was some concern about criminal activity happening on site. The emergency telephone numbers were not prominently displayed. There were not operable telephones in all of the guest rooms, and the appellant testified at the hearing and showed us that he had phones for all the rooms, but what he had was handsets, and he testified that there were only 3 lines for the motel, and one was for use at the office, so the handsets that could be placed in the rooms would only go to 2 other lines. So if more than 2 people had an emergency, they wouldn't be able to call out from a phone in the room, which we didn't think met the requirement. And frankly, and then the operable smoke detectors. Apparently, a lot of people that stay at this motel smoke, and so they disable the smoke detectors. And Mr. Liu said there really wasn't anything he could do about that. He's now saying he would have them checked twice a week. There is a requirement for smoke detectors in the room, and that's a concern because it's a safety concern. Then there were a number of violations of the building code, and the code enforcement officer, Jared Wycliffe, who's here today, documented those. And among the conditions that were the most dangerous were the unsafe lighting, lights outside all of the rooms were not installed correctly. In fact, there was a bird's nest between the light and the wall outside one room, which was a little appalling as a fire hazard. There were exposed wires. There were stoves in the room that weren't secured so they could tip over, gas stoves. There were plumbing fixtures incorrectly installed that could result in scalding, because if it says this way is hot, and in fact it's not, if you act hurriedly, you can burn yourself. There were, I think the electrical issue was rather major, and anyway. So that was some of the violations. There were considerably more than that. And so we presented our evidence, and Mr. Liu presented his evidence, and the hearing officer determined that there were grounds for both revocation and denial of renewal of the license. And then the appellant appealed that. Ordered that the county's actions be upheld, and the appellant requested review before the board.
Supervisor Natoli.
Thanks, Diana. And I know we're going to hear from the appellant, so I don't want to get too many questions till we get a chance to hear from them. But I wanted to first say, though, I appreciate the diligence and the attention that county staff has given to the Casa Linda property. Certainly current ownership is represented here under this particular action, but even going back several years. And I had asked earlier about information, and again, I want to note that we have correspondence today that was just submitted that relates to compliance, and again, I believe code enforcement was actually out there today. This was dated today, maybe it was yesterday. But if we want to ask, let me ask you, so if I want to ask staff, would it be appropriate now, Krista, or it would be? Okay.
About Jared's.
Yeah, so if I could, I want to maybe invite Jared to come on up if you could.
Sure.
Yeah, if I could. Hi, Jared. Good afternoon.
How's it going, guys?
Raise that. We just had correspondence, and appreciate, Jared, I know you've been working on this for, a couple of years.
Yeah.
Did your inspections, because and I'll just say this to the Lous, but to everybody here, the safety issues are paramount. I mean, again, issues on the property as relates to calls for service are indicative, obviously, of other activity that could be unsafe. But I think when it comes to building and certainly our housing violation, those are very, very important, and whether they be toilets that are not attached properly or gas lines that are there's not an anti-tip on the stoves or electrical connections. So you were out there, were you out there today, did the inspection, or yesterday?
It was this afternoon.
Okay. And so you found everything to be in compliance as of this afternoon? As best you could tell, I recognize there's some challenges. So maybe you could just describe where we are with the case as
The only thing we inspected today, and we had set this up 2 weeks ago, not knowing today's hearing was taking place.
Okay.
Just coincidentally, I was there 2 hours ago. But all I inspected for today was correction of the violations we noted 14 days ago. I did not do a top-to-bottom inspection of the 17 units for any other violations that may be new since my visit 2 weeks ago. Just because he keeps, every time we go there and I do a top-to-bottom inspection, we end up with 50 new violations. And, at some point I want to get out of this. I want to give him I was under the impression at the time I did the inspection that this hearing did not exist and the revocation was in place and nobody was supposed to be living there. And there were a number of units that were occupied. And so I was just trying to get a clean break with the 2016 case, sign off that the things that were wrong 2 weeks ago were corrected, and then let the chips fall where they may in the next few days when the next complaint comes in from somebody about new housing conditions that propped up, and then we were going to go from there.
So let me understand you correctly. So you were under the impression the revocation had already occurred, that you didn't know about the hearing, to what your point you just made. And so when you went out there and inspected today, you didn't do the top to bottom as you've done in the past, where I noted in the report that went to the hearing officer that you went out there, you closed some issues out, and then you ended up, I think in one case there was like 31, you got all but 6 of those, but you got 48 new ones.
Right.
And that was going back to the February timeframe, so I don't. But your impression was that when you went out there today, that, bless you, that you were going to be looking for a facility that was going to be closing down, that would no longer have rentals of any sort?
Right, that was my impression, that it was a non-functioning motel as of 10 days ago. And that, so I was just going to sign off that the other things were fixed. And then when it becomes an operation again, we would, and those cause new damages, this and that, we'd address that at that time.
Okay, so when you say case closed, what's that mean in this letter that you sent? Do you close out this 2016 case? Do you still have a 2018 case that's open though?
No. The 2016 case was the only case that was open. So I had correction of the violations from 14 days ago, and that was my clean break, saying I have noted no violations. Had I gone top to bottom today, I'm sure I could have come up with a number of violations as I have in every previous inspection.
Were the building violations closed out, the electrical and such? Yeah.
The 2 building permits have been applied for the electrical work that's been done, and some fees have been paid, but that's all I can elaborate on that. That's a question more for building permits inspection.
Okay, I was trying to get some sense, because obviously this is very current information. It sounds like, unbeknownst to you, we were having this hearing today, and you're saying, so sum up, what's closed mean in this case? You went out there today, you thought the revocation was already in place, looking to wind down, trying to draw some finality to that, but that doesn't mean there's not violations out there. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Tell me what this means.
It means I'm not coming back till we receive a complaint, but our case is closed. We're not going to come back proactively to search again. It will obviously be in the inventory of the Rental House Inspection Program to come back and check on as well, according to what recycle they have. But my return to the property would be dependent on a complaint being filed, and they're filed every 30 to 60 days.
And do you look for some of the things that Diana ran through that were presented to the hearing officer? Were you looking to see if there were, well, you didn't go to every room, that there were phones in every room, that there were operating smoke alarms in every room, that the toilets had been reattached properly? You didn't check all that out today?
No, I didn't check any smoke detectors today. I checked 4 or 5 toilets. I checked a couple of the shower valves that hot was cold, cold was hot, on was off, and vice versa last time.
So the list today, Jared, was just the list that was developed 14 days ago?
Correct. When I went back 14 days ago to inspect the 50-something violations from the previous inspection, we had 7 or 8 that still knew that needed to be done. And, so rather than issue a violation notice from that inspection, we just, okay, here, fix these 8 things up back in a couple weeks. And that's all I looked at, yes.
And are all the rooms occupied?
At least 4 I know of that were occupied because they were rooms I had to inspect. But there were more cars in the parking lot where I did not inspect the rooms, and so those were occupied as well. So a minimum of 4 rooms, maybe as many as 8 rooms were occupied today.
Okay. And I don't mean to put this all off on you because it's been a coordinated effort. And again, I want to give the appellant time to make their presentation. But I guess, when I see business licensing, planning, certainly code enforcement, building, sheriff's office, all have been involved over a course of, a number of years. Some of them predate even, obviously, the lose ownership of the property. You're only looking at the code piece of that, though. So there are still, so for example, business licensing didn't accompany you today. They weren't able to validate whether or not the guest registers, or are you doing that in the coordinated effort? Were you kind of the point person? So you were looking at calls for service, not necessarily your responder, but what about all those issues? How do they, this is only one piece of it. The zoning, the code, building code and zoning code, obviously a big piece of it, because it reflects obviously the maintenance of the property, the condition of the property, both occupied as well as in the surroundings out there. So what about those other issues?
That's correct. My compliance letter that they asked for and we give out upon request based on today's inspection does not indicate full compliance with all county codes and ordinances. This is only representative, and as my inspection report says, which they didn't get a copy of the inspection report, but it says all zoning and housing code violations. I noted no zoning and housing code violations today. I did not speak to the building code violations, the business license conditions that may or may not be met. So. Okay.
So I wanted to sum that up then. So the other things that the hearing officer took into consideration that were presented at the time of that hearing that are before us today, yours is the zoning code piece of that, and it reflects what you just said. But the other outstanding issues, and some of them do relate to safety, those we haven't had those updated, certainly not as of today anyway. So
they could still exist at this time. Yeah.
Okay.
They were not inspected for.
All right. Thank you.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thank you. So I guess the question I have is for Krista. What is this serendipitous new information? What does it mean in the context of the appeal? I'm trying to understand how to digest the recommendation that's in the board letter given this new information.
And I'm struggling with that as well. Obviously, I didn't handle the hearing, so I'm not sure if these violations that Jared has mentioned were ones that were specifically addressed in the hearing officer's decision. So perhaps Diana can respond to that, or whether these were something additional.
Okay.
Diana.
That's your cue.
Or Jared, whoever can do that.
Okay.
So the question being, what is the effect of Jared's notice clearing violations on what was already done at the hearing? Does this somehow clear some of the violations that were
Does it affect the recommendation that's in the board letter?
Where is the notice? Where's the notice? Clear?
I don't know. Maybe you didn't get a copy of it.
Well, as Mr. Whitcliffe indicated, he didn't do a thorough inspection. He was limiting his inspection to specified items. I assume they were the items that were noted in the April 30th inspection. Is that correct? Okay, so I do have that, so I know what that was about. And he said there was a cursory search of the rooms, and that as of April 30th, all the smoke detectors worked.
I mean, somewhere there's a list of violations, right? There's some documentation of...
I'm actually wondering whether a 15-minute recess might be useful, other than trying to figure it out while everyone's standing here. Should we do that?
Okay.
That's fine, since I hadn't seen any of this
Right,
before.
this is late breaking, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna recess for 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, we will come back to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisor Frost?
Here.
Natoli?
Here.
Peters? Cerna? Kennedy?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Mr. Natoli?
Okay. I understand during the recess, I don't know, Krista, if you want to put anything on the record, but that we're going to look to a continuance till June the 18th. Do we have a time for that?
We can do it at 2 p.m.
Okay, so we're going to, the suggestion here, and I'll be making a motion in just a moment, is to, oh, yes. Diana?
It's not working. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Wycliffe is going to be out of town on that day. Could we have like a little bit later than that?
Who's out of town?
Mr. Wycliffe, the code enforcement officer, will be out of town on the 18th. Well, he can be represented by other members of the department, I would.
We've got a whole staff.
No, I realize there are a lot of people that work in that department, but
Yeah,
Members of the board, I think we can make sure somebody from code is here that has Mr. Wycliffe's information.
okay, because okay,
That's fine.
no, that's good. Well, no, I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. I think obviously Jared's been on point, and I appreciate his certainly dedication to working on this issue. But
thank you.
okay, anything else, Diana?
No.
Okay, so just so the Lou's understand, then we would be putting this over until the 18th of June at 2 o'clock. In the meantime, whether it's code, it sounds like code may have conducted obviously the most recent inspection, but any of the other entities. I know this has taken a lot of staff time, but I think in order to have full information with this board that Mr. Gill, I think you described it to me during the break, that we would do another full inspection again. Is that correct?
I believe so. I work with the attorneys to make sure what we can reintroduce or look at. I think as Mr. Wycliffe mentioned, there's only 20% that was looked at, but we need to clear that item, how much was looked at, top to bottom, look at all the violations,
Yeah.
and then bring it back to the board.
Because all the safety issues, and again, that there still is a record of calls for service, but obviously it might be important to have that input from the sheriff's department as well as to where we are currently with that. So, but anyway, without belaboring that, then I think the Lou's understand we're going to continue this to June 18th at 2 o'clock. You will have some additional visits from either inspection team or inspectors, and then we'll be back in this setting at 2 p.m. on June 18th to take this matter up again. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Second. Please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Okay.
Next item.
Are we just going to skip the item that the young person is not here for the spelling bee? If not, we're at the end and it's to county exec comments.
No, I'm going to talk to Lou's when we're done.
Oh, okay.
I just
All right.
signaled them to Abraham.
Okay.
No
you have
comments.
No comments. Any comment from the board? I believe we have an adjournment. Ms. Peters?
Thank you. I'd like to adjourn today in memory of Ed Grabitas Jr. Grabitas Jewelers dates back to 1926 when it opened, and the same year that Ed Grabitas Jr. was born. He later worked for his father, which led the firm to become Grabitas and Sons Jewelers. And this month, the son passed away at age 93, and we lost a gentleman who was truly passionate about developing local businesses and provided much service to our community as a lifetime member of the Rotary Club of Sacramento, as well as a number of other community boards and organizations. While he graduated from Sacramento High School in 1944, he did not walk across the stage to receive his diploma because he had already enlisted in the Navy during World War II and served as a Seabee in the Pacific. Following his discharge, he attended Sacramento City College for a year before studying at UC Berkeley, where he graduated with an economics degree in 1950, which was the same year he married Beth Bruner. Together, they had 6 children, and Mrs. Gravitas died in 2008. He worked for Gravitas Jewelers from the 1950s to the late 1990s and was the driving force behind the opening of the second Gravitas Jewelry location in 1954 and was eventually the company president. He retired in the 90s, and that's when his son Ted took over running the business. He's survived by 6 children, 10 grandchildren, and 11 great-grandchildren. I think the name of Gravitas will always be synonymous with the word jewelry. I'd like the board to adjourn in memory of Ed Gravitas Jr.
Thank you. We will adjourn in the name of Ed Gravitas Jr.
Between the bling and the furniture, they had it all covered.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Retail family.
Yeah.
Oh, really?